You're listening to the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. I'm your host, Dr. April Moreno. I'm a public health specialist focused on integrative wellness and autoimmune living, supporting the community of women, where I help you to live your best quality of life through being your best self-advocate. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to episode 67 of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast. I'm Dr. April Moreno, and I'm here to, first of all, introduce you to my work. I am a public health coach for Autoimmune Mindful Wellness, Autoimmune Living, and Integrative Wellness. So today we're going to be talking about the different ways in which integrative wellness has helped me and can help you as well with autoimmune conditions. I wanted to invite you to an upcoming 8-week session that I'm hosting. It's called the Autoimmune Summer Mindfulness Sessions. And this is a short 30-minute mindfulness exercise practice that's happening every Wednesday starting this week at 12 noon Pacific to guide you through the process of relaxation, awareness, and inner insight, inner knowledge. So if you're interested in learning more about the practices of mindfulness and how it can help you gain energy, gain clearer understanding of your life, your health, your wellness, and also gain control and relaxation over pain, anxiety, and dizziness even, join us at bit.ly/autoimmune sessions to sign up. So today we're talking about how to redesign your life with integrative wellness. This is episode 67 of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living. And so today I'm sharing my story with you because I think it's kind of good to hear where people are coming from when you hear their podcast. So I have a PhD, so what, right? I'm very personable. I share my story and my background because it matters, because this is important information in terms of sharing my journey and also sharing how other people can change their lives with autoimmune conditions as well. So I'm wearing my special shirt here, the Sunshine and Savasana shirt that I got at my yoga teacher training. I have conflicting feelings about yoga teacher training. There's this term that recently I've heard about called spiritual bypassing. And so much of that happened during this year when I was in the program. It started like in April, I believe, actually February, and then it was going to end like in April, but we couldn't finish it because of the pandemic. And there was a lot of what I think is called spiritual bypassing in terms of a lot of conversation and feeling that if you believe the news about the pandemic, then you were not spiritual enough. You were not spiritually aligned. You were not practicing yoga. You were not doing your yamas and niyamas the right way. And also when it came to talking about the racial justice movement, that was also very lacking prominently in a lot of yoga conversations and yoga spaces. So I'm a little on the fence. I'm conflicted when it comes to the yoga practice. I love it. I love my main yoga studio. I love the whole experience and the learning process. For me, it's the inner knowledge that is more important than the physical exercise. So I guess I lean more toward the Eastern approach to yoga practice versus the Western physical exercise approach, which is helpful and beneficial as well, but it doesn't, I'm not physically, what's the word? I'm not a kinesthetic learner. And so it's a lot harder for me to memorize movement versus memorizing concepts, ideas, theories, and ways to practically apply knowledge. So I share all of this because of the fact that it is very much connected to this practice of mindfulness, awareness that I talk so much about in the summer sessions that are coming up starting next Wednesday. You can also learn more about it at my website, aprilmorenophd.com/coaching sessions. But today we're talking about how to redesign your life with integrative wellness. So basically sharing my experience and sharing the key principles that were involved in that journey and still involved in that everyday journey. Because as we know, autoimmune conditions are often chronic illnesses. They're not really going anywhere, but you can manage them. They are your backpack, and whatever that backpack may look like, it is yours alone, and it is your unique journey. So I'm here to share a little bit of hope, guidance, information, resources, and even research at times when it comes to the journey of integrative wellness with autoimmune conditions. So the first level when we talk about integrative wellness is mind, the mental journey of mental wellness. So when I was autoimmune diagnosed in August, well, it took a few months. So I guess it was October of 2006 when I was given the diagnosis in the emergency room, very abruptly, very unfeelingly, very shockingly, right? As some of us have experienced. The mental journey began. And in the last episode, 66, I talked a little bit more about how to change your way of living, change your perspective with autoimmune challenges. And that one was very much related to this mental wellness journey. So in terms of the mental journey, the first part is that sense of surrender. So it is definitely not easy to wrap one's head around a chronic illness diagnosis. It's a shock. It's a shock to the system. You're already having a shock to the body as it relates to physical illness and inflammation and relapse and the autoimmune response. But then also it is a mental journey of a shock to the mind, even when you're hearing like life-shattering, ground-shattering, life-changing, shatteringly changing news in terms of you have this, not knowing in many cases, unless you have relatives, which often is the case, with the same thing or similar things. Sometimes we don't know what this means. Sometimes it's a misdiagnosis. Sometimes we don't even get a diagnosis for many years, if ever. And so it's a mental journey, first and foremost. So that is the foundation of the integrative wellness experience. So that first part involves surrender. I talk about this in the last episode, being able to mindfully surrender to the process of understanding what is going on, knowing that you will probably never understand the full extent of what's going on. I mean, that's the human condition. We don't know everything that we don't know about life and existence, and we just never will. It's not for us to know in many cases. And so there's that cycle of grief. There's anger, there's denial, there's sadness, there's acceptance. And so if you're able to get to that point of acceptance, the journey of healing begins. And, you can argue also like that whole cycle is a part of that process, but some people don't get through it. And it's really difficult. It takes work in many cases to be willing to do the hard work, take on the tough challenge of acknowledging that there is a physical limitation. There's a physical problem, a physical change that needs to take place in one's life. And getting to that point brings you into the growth mindset, as Carol Dweck mentions in her book on mindset. So there's the growth mindset, and then there's another mindset in terms of limitation and fear-based way of thinking. And the sooner we can move forward out of the fear-based thinking, and and it's a mental process, and it requires a lot of contemplation, therapy even, and being willing to accept the challenge, being willing to accept what's really happening. So we talk about this because mindfulness practice, one of the foundational ways of thinking these principles of mindfulness involves awareness and basically acceptance. So you are mindfully just paying attention without judgment to what is happening. Okay, so acceptance is slightly a little bit of a step forward, a little bit more beyond the basic passiveness of mindfulness practice, but stepping forward into acceptance and being able to process the thoughts, process the situation and the circumstance to move forward into healing. So that is the first part that I refer to in terms of the mental wellness journey. It's definitely a part of the mindfulness journey, mindfulness practice, acceptance, but even more so, surrender of the current situation, being willing to accept the problem, the challenge, and being open to moving forward in whatever way that is going to be. So the next one is on the body, physical wellness, on this integrative wellness journey. I think of it in terms of these 4 layers. So the second layer is the body, because of the fact that in many cases, our conditions are triggered by stressful circumstances, pregnancy, surgery, stress, chronic situations, chronic stress circumstances. There's this new principle called adverse childhood events, the ACEs. And I talk a lot about this as well because I think it's so groundbreaking in the primary care space, where they're speaking to children and asking them if they're going through any sort of traumatic experience, because they want to address it head on in early age, because they've seen this direct connection to chronic illness and mental health challenges later on in life as adults. So ACEs Aware is a program that's out there in the public health space, in the primary care space, that helps to address the physical health challenges that children are facing at an early age, so that they don't develop chronic disease and the severity and the challenges of what could happen in adulthood. So it's a beautiful project and program because of the fact that when we look at physical health challenges, so much is connected to that first layer, the mental health challenge, the mental wellness experience. So as we start to experience the chronic illness, the autoimmune disease journey, we are noticing that a lot of it has happened in the mind. A lot of it happens through that process of stress. And then also the physiological, definitely, the pregnancies, the surgeries, the trauma that the body is going through, and the way that we process it. So mind, to me, is the foundation. In many cases, it's going to be stress related, what we're feeling in our bodies. And then again, with the adverse childhood events that we're hearing about, we're seeing in research that is affecting physical health. So body is the second part. So once we get that process down of, okay, being open to getting the help that we need, because I know when I was first diagnosed, when I was going through the chronic illness journey, I really wanted to just disregard it. I didn't want to go to the hospital. I was one of the people who didn't do hospitals. I hardly went to the doctor. I hardly got sick for the most part until I was catching a ton of colds. But I've never had to go to the hospital. I never did emergency room. I was relatively physically healthy, although I was going through a ton of mental health challenges throughout childhood and so on, those adverse events. But so the next thing I wanted to say about that is that if you don't address the mental health challenge, you wouldn't be, in many cases, able to realize, I have to take this on. I have to go to the doctor. I can't just shrug this off. And in many cases, I'm hearing with a lot of maybe the younger population with autoimmune conditions, they don't want the label. In many cases, they don't want to be known as that girl with, that kid with. So they don't want to address the illness. And if in a relapsing, remitting sort of circumstance, if it's gone, it's gone. I'm not going to worry about it anymore, right? Until the next time the relapse comes along and it's worse than before, and it can result in disability, further damage to the body. So that mind-body connection is crucial. The next layer of this integrative wellness journey is the spiritual wellness part. So they're not necessarily in chronological order, but these are various layers. So as we address the spirit, this is the all-encompassing, and in many practices, as we talk about yoga, we talk about consciousness levels, there's this layer of universal consciousness, and then there's cosmic consciousness out there. And this is just one school of theory and one school of thought, but basically it is your connection with God, your higher purpose, your higher power. So along this storyline, right, you start out, in many cases, I started out with a very stressful work environment. I had depression, anxiety, and then the physical manifestations took place through relapse and permanent or temporary disability, fluctuating disability, and the body physical manifestation happened second. The third part that happened along this storyline, this timeline, was the spiritual journey, because now I have this diagnosis. Now I have this very terrifying and grim prognosis, grim diagnosis. And now it's like, what do I do with this? This is bigger than my realm of understanding. This is bigger than what I'm capable of handling alone. And this was the time that me and God became super close, because I knew that I was completely out of my realm of understanding and even personal power. I didn't have any, because I didn't have any, I couldn't grasp the awareness. So that spiritual journey was really challenging, because I couldn't grasp what was happening in my physical body. It wasn't clear to me what was happening in my life, and I wasn't even sure if I was going to survive it. I had no knowledge of what this diagnosis was about. I didn't know anyone with it. So spirit became a big part of my daily thinking and living. I was reading my Bible. I was in complete prayer, like throughout days and weeks, because I was completely humbled by the fact that this is out of my control. So the spiritual part of the integrative wellness journey is also really important, because it also connects to your personal purpose. It connects to who you are and your reason for being here. If you were given a life-threatening diagnosis, what's next? So that connection to spirit, connection to the universal experience and the cosmic experience, that power of the body and beyond, to be honest, is really what the spiritual wellness process is about. That level of awareness of who we are, how we're connected to one another, and how we are connected to our higher power. So that is the third level, this third layer in the integrative wellness journey. The fourth one is environment. So once you're able to get a grasp of some level of understanding in terms of the literature, in research, community building, understanding the medication options, the treatment options, the nutrition options, all these things, now you're able to further contemplate the environment. So we talked a little bit just now about the friendships that you could make, the community that you can be part of. And I do want to say this, when I was diagnosed and I would go to community spaces, I found people that I did not connect with. First of all, I found people who were promising me, guaranteeing to me horrible things that were going to happen to me. And nobody has the power to tell you what will happen to you. Everyone's condition is unique. I went there to learn more. I left totally freaking scared when I left that support group. It was not support. It was something else. And I didn't ever want to go back. And that's why the Sisterhood of Limitless Living exists. I'm very passionate about encouragement, positivity, growth, and the learning process, the growth mindset versus I'm going to sit here and commiserate with people in a support group and tell you how bad it's been for me and not what I'm going to do about it. And when someone new comes in, I'm going to tell them how bad it's going to get. That is not support. Hello. So anyways, environment is important as we contemplate the role we want to play, as we grasp our understanding of our chronic illness journey. How do we want to contribute our purpose, in our purpose? How do we want to be of service and help others along their journey? How are we influencing others? In the leadership theoretical space, leadership theory, in some places, some thinkers, they say that everybody is a leader. And I truly believe that because there are different types of leaders. In the most recent literature, we're looking at 5 levels of leadership. And it's so interesting to me because the transformational leader, the level 5 leader, the servant leader, is so much like our spiritual leaders, like Jesus, for example. Our spiritual guidance is so similar to the highest level of leadership. It's so beautiful. The more of a leader you are, the less power you have, the more you give it freely. It's so beautiful. All of this to say that everyone is a leader in their own way. We all influence one another. The way that we choose to go out into the world and speak to other people, whether it's a positive word or a negative word, you are impacting lives, whether you realize it or not. Your energy, your conversation, the way that you speak to people, the way you think about other people and the way you treat them, it influences others, and that is a form of leadership. So when we think about environmental wellness, there's just a whole wealth of things we can talk about here because I come to this from a public health perspective. Public health is so interesting and I love it so much. It has its, issues as well, but we look at the social determinants of health, and there are some other ways people are starting to discover and discuss these determinants. But basically, public health says that your zip code can determine your lifespan. And we mean this because your air quality, your safety, the traffic around you, the air, noise, and water quality, and so on, affect your quality of life. In a past episode, we talked about the autoimmune epidemic, this book that was published a few years ago. And I really want to continue to explore this concept that environmental factors may be related to chronic disease, autoimmune disease diagnoses in certain populations next to toxic facilities. So this is something I want to continue to look at because environment is going to be an increasingly crucial issue in the next decades of our existence here on Earth. So there's so much to say about environment, but basically, in essence, what I'm saying is contemplation of your purpose. Why is it that you were given this diagnosis? How did this come to be? Nothing to say about blame. That's not productive. But what can you learn from this experience? And how can you help others along the journey? How can you be of service in your life? What is your purpose here on Earth? So these are profound concepts and questions when we come to the spiritual and the environment part. So the mind and body are more of the internal processes, the contemplative and the manifestation on our bodies physiologically. But then the spiritual and the environmental parts are where we begin to fully engage with our identity and how we are, why and how we are here. So these are beautiful concepts when we think about the integrative wellness journey. And these are deep and profound concepts. The autoimmune diagnosis is just the beginning. The symptoms are just the beginning. These are teachers. These are things that we can learn from if you have a growth mindset. a learning mindset. These are ways in which we can propel our personal challenges. And this is a universal theme in life, regardless of whether it's an autoimmune disease or anything else. That personal challenge, it's your TED Talk. When you go through a life challenge, a crisis, a tragedy, and you turn it around and you see a purpose in it, that's a TED Talk. That is a powerful story, powerful message that you can use to help and serve humanity. So that's my conversation and my talk for today on this episode on how to redesign your life with integrative wellness. If you're interested in learning more about the integrative and the contemplative process involved in this journey, join us on Wednesdays this summer. For 8 weeks, we're doing the summer sessions in mindfulness. So these are free, donation-based, not required, but donations are welcome. To join us on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Pacific. I will be guiding you through various mindfulness practices along the integrative wellness journey. Chronic disease or not, you are welcome to join us. And again, that's at bit.ly/autoimmune sessions. I hope to see you there. Take care, and until next week. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Sisterhood of Limitless Living podcast, Season 2. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Look forward to having you join us in upcoming episodes as well, where we continue to talk about integrative wellness and autoimmune living our best lives, being our own best advocates. Feel free to subscribe on iTunes to the podcast, and we are also available on several other locations as well. For more information about Dr. April Moreno, you can visit aprilmorenophd.com. Take care.